Hi, I'm Steve Forbes, and you're watching Traders Nation.
Welcome back. You are tuned in to Traders Nation. My pleasure to have with us here today book author David Scranton. All right. He penned Return on Principle, 7 core values to help protect your money in good times and bad. David, welcome to Traders Nation. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. David, what brought you to write Return on Principle?
Well, I realized in interviewing people that were very successful throughout their lives as investors versus those who were not, advisors who were very successful in terms of the results they'd gotten for their clients versus those who were not. And I realized that the difference had a lot less to do with their knowledge. A lot had to do with whether or not they had the right instincts to be a good investor or a good advisor. You know, we all go to school to learn the algorithms as to how to allocate people's money and when to buy, when to sell.
Sure.
But the most important missing element was that of the proper instincts. Kind of like, you know, Dr. House on that television sitcom.
Sure, sure.
He has the proper instincts, which is what makes him get better results than other doctors, at least in that fictional world.
Yeah, nice. Well, you know, you're absolutely right. I mean, a lot of folks, I mean, the guy in the street, okay, they work hard, they save their money, but they're not savvy a lot in investing for that long term for retirement, right? And some of them aren't even a numbers guy. I know you're a numbers guy, right? But some just don't know what to do. So what would be like the core basis that folks can use and get out of Return on Principle where they can use that to help them get along in investing for retirement?
Well, the beauty about what the book does is the book actually gets people to, it has questions where people can introspectively ask the questions and take the quiz and determine whether or not they have good instincts in the 7 various areas. And then they can also use another set of questions if they have a financial advisor to go and talk with that financial advisor and interview that advisor with those same questions. Because, you know, just because someone took financial advisory as a career path doesn't necessarily mean they have the right instincts. They may like the career for lots of other reasons. Just like, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who got in the medical field not because they really want to help people, but because they figure, gee, that's a way to make a lot of money and be successful. So the idea of the book is to be a tool that people can use to make these determinations on their own and then decide whether they need to do it themselves or find the right help and then determine who that right help really is.
Okay. All right. So certainly, and they can certainly, you've got, you've got your own business. You've got your own show over there at Newsmax TV, too. They can gain some information over there. The name of that is called Host. The Income Generation Show is what you've got over at Newsmax. Let me ask you something. All right. Would you agree that old rules investing are off the table and new rules are in play? And if so, what are those new rules?
In a lot of cases, you're correct.
Yeah.
You have to. Now, I say that with kind of tongue-in-cheek. You have to be careful of making the mistake to think, well, this time it's going to be different. Every time somebody falls in the trap of thinking this time it's going to be different, you know, some bubble bursts in our economy and someone ends up losing a lot of money.
Yeah.
But in some ways, the rules are different. And the biggest reason is because the amount of government intervention, the amount of government manipulation, that's been absolutely unprecedented. You know, the Federal Reserve is really not supposed to care about what Wall Street thinks. But I believe we've gone into an era now where the Federal Reserve really does do things to keep Wall Street happy.
Yeah.
And there are societal reasons for that. I mean, you know, when people's 401ks are worth more, their net worth is up, they feel better, they're more likely to go out and spend money for psychological reasons. They feel better, they feel more affluent, they'll go out and spend money.
Yeah.
And that's what people need to do to stimulate the economy. So I guess you can make an argument that the Federal Reserve should be concerned about that, but it's really never been part of their official dictate.
You know, they've used quantitative easing for years and years, and you're absolutely right. I mean, if the federal government coming in and the feds, for that matter, working together to help the market, right? I mean, that's literally what they're doing. They brought interest rates down to 0. They've kept them there. That is an intervention, and that is a concern directly tied to Wall Street that you're talking about, right?
It's a big concern, and that happened, as you said, really since the last almost 9 years now that's been going on.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's funny, I had somebody here just yesterday who was talking a lot about the markets and talking a lot about, became a big Elliott wave theorist.
Right.
And, you know, Elliott wave in many forms, Robert Proctor, has been predicting a downturn in the market. And if she came in and said, I got Elliott waived, and I said, what do you mean? She says, well, I took short positions and I lost all this money. And I said, ultimately a lot of the stuff that he writes about is probably correct and will happen. But where it gets riskier and riskier now more than ever is trying to predict the when. Because things can go in the other direction for a long time if they're being manipulated by the government. It's that old saying, you can't bet against the government.
No.
That's the biggest thing that's changing the world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the one factor, and that's a huge factor that folks that may not be aware of, is that you absolutely can be blindsided by intervention with the government. For instance, just a quick example we're talking about here on the show today, AT&T and the Time Warner merger, right? Everything's going along great. Time Warner gaps up, and here we have DOJ getting involved on a possible merger that they want to do. It may not happen. So that's a good example of that. Would you agree?
That's a great example. Absolutely. And I can think of other things. You think about real estate. They're talking now about the possibility, and I don't know if this is still being bantered around a little bit, the possibility of taking the $1 million mortgage, the maximum for deductible interest, and dropping it to $500,000.
Yeah.
So you look at that and say, well, what will that change in a tax law do to real estate values? Well, the answer is we don't know. But it's a factor. And it's a factor that's not natural based upon natural, normal supply and demand. It's a factor that's being artificially manipulated.
Yeah, it sure is. All right, so you talked about bubbles. Let's talk about, we had the tech collapse. We had the 2008 meltdown. And like you mentioned, some are kind of worried about, are we coming into another bubble? Let's face it, David, we're in an area we've never been before on the markets, down as like all of them. Is there a top? Of course there is. Is there going to be a pullback? Probably. But how big is a big question here. How can folks, the guy in the street, again, he can't watch his portfolio closely. What can they do to protect themselves and their retirement nest egg?
Well, it depends. First of all, how old they are, as you well know, and if I tell people if they're 50 and over is what we call the income generation. Why? Because that's the age at which people need to start thinking a little bit less growth and a little bit more income, interest and dividend-based investments.
Sure.
They need to start slowly lowering the risk once they get to about age 50 is a good general rule. And so that person should be making decisions based upon that, their proximity to retirement, and can they afford another period with zero growth? When the tech bubble burst, we had 7 years before we recovered, which meant zero growth for 7 years. The financial crisis, they were 6 years.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that people, I think, need to look at right now is the possibility of, unless they're in mutual funds, you can't do this in mutual funds, but stop losses. Using stop losses to protect their downside. So if something turns quickly, they're only down 5 or 7 or maybe even 10% maximum.
Sure.
Because at this point, things look good, momentum strong, and a lot of people are predicting a blow-off in the markets. We can have 2 more years of just this irrational exuberance pushing markets up.
Yeah.
And sometimes that euphoria can create that type of event. However, the reality is that I don't personally like betting on things that aren't real. I'm not going to buy a building that's sitting on the top of a marsh. I'm only going to buy it if it's got pilings under it and it's nice and stable. And right now, the foundation doesn't support the market, and that's where the risk is. So stop losses can at least protect people to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But those over 50 need to be really, really cautious.
Yeah, and diversified in their portfolio, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah, that goes without saying. Absolutely.
Sure. Diversify, stop losses help. All right, so we're almost out of time here today. There's something that we haven't touched about today on your book. Well, actually, we are out of time. My apologies. All right, so let's talk about this. Where can we get a copy of Return on Principle, David?
Right to the website, returnonprinciple.com, and principle ends in P-L-E. And no, it's not an error. We did that on purpose.
Awesome. Return on Principle. David Scranton's with us here today. Go over to that website here today, plus get a copy at Amazon. Support your local bookstore, too, on the corner. Needs your business. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.